morning. A very warm greetings to all of you today. For those of you who are visiting here at Parish, my name is Father Kevin Cooper. I'm the administrator of the parish, and along with our associate Father Frank and our deacon Mark Pipes, we want to welcome you, and with the community as well, we want to welcome you here to our parish for the celebration of the Eucharist this Sunday. Holy cow, I forgot what I was going to say. She's going to be a rough go. A few years ago, on a Friday, a warm spring day, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was on my way to St. John, and I was traveling on Indianapolis Boulevard, also known as US 41, and I was in the highway, and I was kind of going along, minding my own business, doing my own thing. And as I passed through the intersection at Ridge Road and Indianapolis Boulevard, all of a sudden the traffic flow came to a complete halt, almost without warning. And I thought, wow, this must be a really bad accident. And I looked ahead of me, and there was no traffic coming north, and clearly we were not moving in the south lane. And I thought, well, you know, if it's such a bad accident, where are the emergency vehicles? Why are there no sirens? I don't hear anything at all. And I waited and waited a little bit longer, and I still didn't hear anything, still didn't see anything. And finally, I put my head out the window, just trying to see what was the cause of the traffic jam. And all of a sudden, I saw it. There was a mother duck and her 8 little ducklings that were waddling across the road. And I thought to myself, this is amazing. These tiny little ducks that probably weigh less than a pound are stopping these massive vehicles of every size so they can get across the road. One of the busiest intersections in Northwest Indiana. Events like that have the capacity to completely rearrange what the common wisdom that we receive. Where we often hear that bigger is better, and that the stronger survive. But here, in these little ducklings, we understand that actually vulnerability has a lot of power. Vulnerability has control. Now, if you and I are listening to the gospel closely, we understand that this is really what Jesus' line of thinking is offering to us today. Remember that this reading today is actually a continuation of the reading from last Sunday. And remember, June, what was the gospel reading from last weekend? It was from the 18th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, right? Good. And you also remember too that we're right in the middle of the community discourse, right? Good. And remember last week, Jesus offers us a procedure for forgiveness. He tells us what we need to do to forgive. Do you remember? He said, if someone sins against you, you must go to that person and talk to them. And if they don't receive you, if they don't acknowledge their fault, then go and get a few people, 2 or 3. And those 2 or 3 bring with you and confront the person again. And if the person still doesn't respond, if it still doesn't accept responsibility for their fault, then tell the whole community. Tell the whole church. And if the person still will not accept responsibility for their offense, then they must be treated as the Gentiles and the tax collectors. In other words, they must be taught and they must be formed, as Jesus was doing that very thing with the tax collectors and the Gentiles. That's what Jesus was about last week. And today we come to the very, very core of what we're about. Jesus, in the reading this weekend, Peter approaches Jesus and asks him one very, very simple question. If my brother sins against me, how many times must I forgive him? 7 times? And notice Jesus' response. He says, no, not 7 times, but 77 times. Now there's lots of interpretation that surrounds the whole notion of 77 times, but ultimately all the commentators say the same thing. What Jesus ultimately is saying is that we cannot stop forgiving. The number 77 is limitless. It is the perfect number. And you and I cannot stop forgiving. Our willingness to offer forgiveness to those who harm us must be unlimited. And that's huge. Jesus is throwing us a tremendous challenge. We absolutely must never stop forgiving. And again, this is at the very core of who we are as people created in the image and likeness of God. This is at the very core of who we are as disciples of Jesus. Because think about it, we were created for a very specific purpose. When God created Adam and Eve, He looked at them and He said, "Be fruitful and multiply." In other words, create a community. Be social people. You and I cannot create community if we are isolating ourselves from one another. You and I cannot create a community of people. We cannot be joined in communion with one another if we're pushing people away. And that is that's the very reason, or one of the very reasons why we come back week after week to church. So that we can experience and we can come to know what that forgiveness actually looks like. We see that forgiveness every time we come and we gaze upon the cross, as we gaze upon Jesus Christ crucified on the cross. Remember, He gives us the primary example. He is hanging on the cross. He looks down at all the people who accused Him, who condemned Him, who tortured Him, and who hung Him on that cross. And notice what He does. He looks up to the Father and He says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Jesus didn't like what those people did with Him. He didn't condone what they did with Him. But He accepted what they did to Him, and He moved on. And notice what happened. Jesus died. And He rose again. And He ascended to the Father. My friends, that's how you and I need to understand acceptance. You and I need to understand that it is making ourselves vulnerable. It is accepting the responsibility of being hurt. It is acknowledging the fact that we have been wounded. And we don't have to like it. We don't have to condone it. We don't even have to forget it. But we have to continue to move on so that we can find the life that's really been offered to us. The reading from the Book of Wisdom says it very clearly. They said that sin and revenge are hurtful things. If we hold on to them, it's not going to lead us anything but destruction. But if we're willing to forgive, then we have a whole new world waiting for us. We have lots of promise before us. We won't get hung up in bitterness. We won't get hung up in anger. We won't get hung up in sadness. And I'm the first one to tell you, there's lots of things to be angry about. There's lots of things to be upset about. I realize that people lie about us, they lie to us, they violate us, they hurt us, they betray us, they attack us. In so many different ways, in a myriad of different ways, we are hurt every day. But at the end of it all, we become very clear that holding on to that anger isn't going to do anything but weigh us down. Jesus shows us over and over again as He hangs on that cross. Forgiveness is what will free us. Forgiveness brings us new life. It was really interesting to watch those ducks waddle along. It took them a while, 4 lanes of traffic in fact, but little by little they made their way to their destination. And every one of those cars, every one of those motorcycle drivers, every one of those truck drivers waited until every duck finished. None of them were harmed. Then after the ducks reached the other side of the road, the traffic continued on its way. really does have a lot of power. And that's what you and I need to consider. Forgiveness is not about weakness. Forgiveness is about vulnerability. And when we are willing to accept that we've been hurt, and we're willing to move on, then we're able to show real power as Christ gave it to us, the power to live the life of